Welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at CSS borders. How do we style borders, margins, and padding using CSS? We are going to delve straight into the code because I believe that it's better to just code and visualize so that we understand what we are doing. So we're just going to dive straight into coding. So, in order for us to start, we have the simple HTML, which is pretty much empty. We only have an H2 header, which tells us that we are looking at the border styles, and then the P tag, which is the paragraph tag, which just gives a little description to say that this is used to display the type of border, right? So, we haven't really done anything yet. So there are various types of border styles, and we are going to be looking at them one by one so that we know how they look like. So the first one that I want us to look at, and let me first create a P uh, tag again, a paragraph, and just put a description. This is a dotted border, right? A dotted border. And so we want to create a dotted border here. So I'm going to add a class to this, and I'm going to call this class dotted dotted. Okay. So in order to style this, and if I refresh this, we only see a dotted border, right? But then we want to style this. So I am going to style it in the head section. So I'm going to create my style tag. So I'm going to put all my styles in there. So I know I want to style the paragraph, right? And specifically the the dotted class. So all I can do is I can just say p dot dotted, right? And then I can style it in here. So I can put all the styles that I want for this dotted class in there, right? So the property that I'm going to be styling is called the border style. So I'm going to call it the border style. And if I scroll down, I can see here. And then the first type that we're going to be looking at is called dotted, right? You can see there are so many that we can use. Dotted, double groove, hidden, solid, all that. We're going to be looking at those. So we're going to be looking at the first one called dotted, right? And if I refresh this, you can see the dotted border style. You do not necessarily have to put the P here if you don't want to. All you need to do is the dot and then the class name should be enough to target this class, right? So if I refresh it, you still see the dotted border style, right? So you don't have to put it there, but if you want, you can still put it there. Whichever you want is a preference thing. So you still have that. The next one we are going to be looking at is called the dashed border, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy this and paste it here and just make a couple of edits. I'm just going to change this class name to dashed, and then I'm going to just change this to dashed. Okay, and then I'm going to style it here, and maybe I can put all this in one line just so I have a lot of space right here. Okay, and so all I need to do is copy this, paste it down here, and then I can target this by just saying dashed, and then selecting dashed as my value for the border style. So when I refresh this, right, you have the dashed border. And you can see that it's a little different from the dotted border. It has the dashes instead of the dots. So that is what the dots border is. And then the next one that we want to look at will be the solid border. And so I'm just going to call this solid, and it doesn't have to be the same name. You can name it anything you want to. Just I like to keep it consistent. So then I can target it in my styles by saying p dot this time solid, and then the value for my style should be solid, right? And so when I refresh this again, I have my solid border. The next one would be the double border, right? So I'm gonna copy it again, and this is gonna be repetitive, so bear with me. So I'm gonna have the double, and then this is a double border, right? So then I can style it p dot double, and then the value should be a double. So if I refresh this, you have the double border, right? The next one we want to look at is the groove, right? So copy it again, and then the class name, I'm gonna say groove, and then a groove border, and then I'm gonna style it now, groove right here, and the value for your border style should be groove, right? So when I refresh this, you can see that this is the groove border, right? And then we have another type called the ridge border. So I'm gonna call this ridge, and then I'm gonna name this as the ridge border, and then I'm gonna create the style for it, right? P dot ridge, and I'm gonna set this value to be ridge, right? So when I refresh this is how the ridge border looks like. Good. Then the next one that we would be looking at will be the inset border. So I'm gonna call this, I'm gonna name this class insets, and then just so we know, I'm gonna put this as inset, and then I'm gonna style this. The property I'm gonna be looking at again will be the border style, right? And I'm gonna set the value to insets. Good. So if I refresh this is how the inset border style looks like. Again, we have the outsets, right? Which is literally the opposite of the inset. So you're gonna see how that will look like. Outsets. I'm gonna change this to outset. And then I'm gonna style it. So p dot outset. And so the value for the property should be outset. So if I refresh this, you can see that's literally the opposite of the inset border, right? So we have the none also. If you don't want any border, you can also use that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create it, and then I'll set this class to none, and then I'm just gonna say no border, right? And then I'm gonna style this p dot none, and then border style set to none. Okay, so when I refresh this, you can see that it does not have any border whatsoever. Right. There's another type which is not none, but it's hidden. And so let's try and see how that looks like. Right. So I'm gonna have hidden, a hidden border, right? And then I'm gonna style this p dot hidden, and the value, you guessed it right, should be hidden. And it's very I need to encourage you guys to do this along with me, because the more you code this stuff out, the better you grasp the topics and the more comfortable you guys will become, right? So this is a hidden border, so it looks like it has no border, but it does, is just hidden, right? So the last one that we would be looking at will be the mixed border, right? So let's look at that. So I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna set this to mix, a mixed border, and you can find all this in w3schools.com, right? A mixed border, right? So I'm gonna just style this out, p dot mixed, or mix, because that's the name of the class, and I'm gonna set this to a mixture. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just not gonna uh there's no value for it that is constant. You want to mix it up, right? So you want uh a bunch of styles that we already have, right? So I want the dotted one first. So it's gonna start from the top, and it's gonna go clockwise, right? So that's how it is. So it's gonna start from the top. So I'm gonna have a dotted at the top. Then on the right side, I might want to have dashed, right? And then at the bottom, I'm gonna have a solid, and on the left side, let's say a double, right? So when I refresh this, you see it's gonna start from the top and it's gonna go clockwise. So we have the dotted, the next one is going to be the dashed, and then we have the solid, and on the left side we have the double. So this just displays all the border styles that we have, or most of the border styles that you may use in your HTML files or your pages, right? So uh, there may be others that has not been mentioned, but this is the major ones that you would need. So you can just take a look at it, just code along, try to recreate this, and you should be fine. So the next property that we want to look at is the border width, right? So you can see the width of the border here is set. If you wanted to set, if you wanted to change the width of these borders, you could, right? So we are gonna be looking at how to do that. So I'm gonna take the first one, which is the dotted style, the first one on top here, and I'm gonna add another property, and this property will be called the border width, right? Because we want to change the width of this border, and you can change it using uh pixels. We have the em, the cmpt inch, whatever, right? Or you can also use predefined values like medium, thick, thin, right? So we're going to look at explore each of these, right? So for example, if I wanted to change this to 5 pixel, I just set this to 5 pixel, and then when I refresh this, it's now a 5 pixel dotted border, right? So maybe 3 pixels would look better. So when I do this, it changes back to 3 pixels. Right. So you can do this. Another way you can do this will be to, and maybe I should change the one for the dashed, right? So I'm gonna add another property called the border width, and I'm gonna set this to thick, right? So when I refresh this, you can see that it was changed to a thick dashed border. So this property is very important because it helps you to change the width of your borders, right? So you can do that to all the ones that we already have if you want to just explore how that is gonna look like. Again, if you wanted to change the sizes of your borders differently for all the sizes of your borders, you could actually. Let's try that, right? So with this, let's try the third one. Yes, the solid one, right? So let's do this. So we have some space. So we're gonna add the border style. Oh, sorry, the border width, and then uh, just like we did for the mixed border, each side is gonna have a value. So you're gonna start from the top, then we look at the right, and then the bottom, and then the left, right? So if I wanted the top border should be of width, say 5 pixel, and then the right hand side should be 2 pixel, then the bottom should be say 7 pixel, and then the left side should be, let's say, 3 pixel, right? And then if I refresh this, you see that the top was indeed 5 pixel, then we have a 2 pixel, a 7 pixel, which is the biggest, and then the left side is 3 pixel. So you can mix and match the widths of your borders like that, right? We can also add some color to our borders, right? And the property that we would be using would be called the border color, right? So for the first one, we can just set our border color to say red, right? And if I refresh this again, you see that the color of this border was indeed changed to red, right? And again, you can use all the different color types. You can use RGB, HSL, hex, whatever you are comfortable with. You can use those to change it or affect the color. In in this also, you can also change the color of the border sides individually. So if you wanted the top border to be different from the sides, you could also do that. Again, it goes from top to right to bottom to left. So let's do for the solid, I'm gonna just do this one. So I'm gonna do the border color, right? And I'm gonna set the top to red, the right to green, the bottom to yellow, and the left, I'm gonna put in the blue, right? So when I refresh this, you can see that all the sides have changed, right? So that's how we change, use or edit or change the color of our borders. There's not much to know when it comes to changing the color. It's just if you decide you want to use hex, HSL, whatever, just know which whether you want to do it uniformly across all the sides of your border or you want to change the colors with respect to the side that you are targeting. Okay. Finally, you must be thinking that, I mean, this is a lot of styles to write for just a border, right? So there's a shorthand for styling your border, which we are gonna look at. So I'm gonna create a final P here, and then call this shorthand border, right? And then I'm gonna class this. I'm gonna call this shorthand. Okay, so let's try and style this one here. So P dot shorthand. Okay, and then okay. So the shortcut to this is you can use the border property. So not the border style, not the border width, not the border color, but just border, right? The property called border, and then here, you can put all three properties in this at the same time. So if you wanted the thickness, the type, which is the border style, and then the color, you can just put it as one line. So I can just put here 5 pixel. I need it to be solid, and I need it to be red, right? So if I refresh this, you can see it's a 5 pixel solid red border, right? So this is a shorthand for you not to have different lines of property and values. You can just put all as one line and as one property, right? So this is kind of like a shorthand, a short way to do it, right? If you prefer this, you can use it. If you want the longer way to go about it, you can also do that. Again, like all of these ones, if you only wanted to target, say the right border, left border, top border, bottom border, you can specify. So for example, with this one, if I wanted the top border, border left, border right, I can always, so if I say I just wanted the border right, right, and I refresh this, you're gonna see only the border right has the style in, right? So you can always target which side of your border that you want. So I'm gonna leave it like this, right? And again, you can also have a background color to your borders if you want your background color to your P, which is fine, right? So you can do a lot of pretty neat stuff with this. One more thing before we go to margins, would if we wanted to have rounded uh, rounded borders, right? How do we do it? There is a property that we call uh, rounded border radius that you can set to give it that rounded. So I'm just gonna add that property here so we can see how it looks like. Okay, so it's called the border radius, and I can set this to say 5 pixels, right? So when I refresh this, you can see that it kind of round off the edges of your border, right? So maybe I should do 7 so that we can see it, right? So as you can see, the edges of or the corners of your border is being rounded. So that is the border radius property. So let's move straight to margins. Margins are used to create space around your elements, right? Outside of any defined borders. So uh, we are talking about, and we are going to take a look at this so you can see, right? So it's just a space around your element, right? So let's take a look at this. Let's just take an example, and then we can uh, be able to tell from that, right? So CSS has properties for specifying the margin for each side of an element. So we have the top margin, the right margin, the bottom margin, and the left margin, right? So we can set margins for all the sides of the element. So again, the margin property can have values that are auto set, that is the browser calculated, and then length, so you can set it in pixels, percentage, which gives you the percentage width containing the element, and then inherits from the parent element, right? So we can also have negative values if you want. So let's set, let's take an example and set some margins. Okay, so for the first p uh, dotted border, let's put a margin. Let's add a margin, right? So I'm gonna say, and I told you that we can have margin for the top, right? So I'm gonna set the margin for the top to 100 pixels, right? So when I refresh this, you can see that after your element, the top part, that's the space between your element and the outside, right? Outside the border. So outside from the border to the outside element, the space there, uh, it's 100 pixels. So only for the top, right? So you can see only the top shifted because we wanted 100 pixel gap between this border and then this element right here, which is also a P element, right? So let's do it for the right also and see how it's gonna look like. So I'm gonna have a margin and I'm gonna say right. And this time I'm gonna say 50 pixels, right? So then when I refresh this, you can see that from the edge of this right border to the end, it's a 50 pixel width, right? So yeah, that is how to do it. If you wanted it to be uniform across all the sides, we could have just said, and then maybe I should do it for this dashed border. I could have just said margin and then just set this to 100 pixels. Okay, and when I refresh this, you can see that this is 100 pixels across the top, the right, the bottom, and the left, right? So that is the difference. Again, you can also specify different values for each side, and there's a shorthand that we can use, right? And so let us use, which one should we use? Maybe this one, the solid one. So I can say margin, and then the values, I'm gonna start from the top again, 25 pixel. Then the next one is gonna be the right, 25 pixel. So the right, I'm gonna say 50 pixels. The bottom, I'm gonna say 75 pixel. And then the left, I'm gonna say 100 pixel. So it could be different if you want it. So when I refresh this, you can see, and it's gonna have different margins for each side. So that's the difference. There is an auto value that you can use to uh, automatically center the element within its container. So let's say the double with this one, which is the double style. If I say margin and I put in the auto, it does it for you automatically. So it centers it automatically within that. So these ones are automatic anyway. So it tries to center it uh, horizontally within its container, right? So that's why you don't see any change. So that's what the the margin does. Let's take a look at other things that we can do with the margin, and we have what we call the margin collapse, right? And so sometimes two margins can collapse into a single margin, right? And let's take a look at that. And what margin collapse is, and I can use what we already have to explain. So this dashed border has a margin of 100 pixels across board, right? So it has a 100 pixel margin here in the bottom side also. This one, which is the solid border, has a top margin of what? 25 pixel. So you're expecting 25 plus 100, giving it a 125 margin between them, right? But that's not it. The margin collapses the margin into this. So the maximum one is what this margin is going to be. So this is a 100 pixel margin. This is 25. So this margin here is going to be 25. So it's not 125 as expected, but the margin collapse allows it to just be 100 pixels. So let's look at what padding is. So we talked about margins, which is the space outside. Now padding is used to create space around the element contents, right? Inside of that border, right? So the first one is from the border outward, but when we talk about padding, we're talking about the content to your border. The space there is the padding space, right? So let's take a look at some examples. We can also pad the top, right, bottom, and left like we did with the margins. So you can specify that. And we can use percentage pixels, whatever you want to use to specify that. So for the first one again, I'm gonna come back to my dotted. I'm gonna say padding top, right? And I'm gonna define 50 pixels for that. So when I refresh this, you see that from the content to the edge of your border, the top side is now giving you a pattern of 50, right? So it's the same as your margin. You can use virtually all the size if you want to, and it should give you the same um, result. So if you wanted to pad each side differently, we could also do that, right? We can, and let's do it for the dashed border. I'm gonna add my padding, and I'm gonna say I want my top to be 25 pixels, my right side to be 50 pixels, sorry, 50 pixels, my 25 for the pixels, and another 50 for the left, right? So when I refresh this, you can see that the space has increased according to the pattern values that we set, right? So we can do that if we want to. Uh, if we wanted, so this is the thing uh with padding, right? You can also one thing that we can do is box sizing, right? So we can use the box sizing property to keep the width constant, like at a specific value, no matter the amount of padding. That's if you want to maintain a specific width, right? So you can try it out, but you guys are free. I don't want to go past uh, 30 minutes, which I have done. But yeah, so thank you for watching, guys, and see you in the next lesson.